Hello everyone, I'm ChessQueen Alexandra Kosteniuk, and I will comment for you today my sudden death game from the 2010 Machu Picchu Cup against Deysi Cori, who is the current girls under 16 world champion. We are in Machu Picchu, Peru, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. I cannot imagine a nicer place to play chess. I am playing this game with black, and my opponent, Deysi Cori, started the game with d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6. We're repeating the same variation as we played in the second game, e3, b6, b3, bishop b7, bishop b2. It's a very solid Queen's Indian defense, d5, bishop d3, bishop e7, castle, castle, c4, c5, white took on d5, c takes d5, e takes d5, knight c3. Here I'm choosing where to put my knight, onto c6 or d7. Finally I decided to play knight c6. After knight c6, white took on c5, d takes c5, b takes c5, rook c1, and now we have a classical position with 2 hanging pawns, which can be weakness or a strength. So it's up to black how they will use it. And I made a very interesting move, which is queen a5. It's not a very common move. And white decided to use this strange looking move immediately by playing knight a4 and attacking my hanging pawns. But the idea behind his queen a5 is actually not to protect these pawns, but to sacrifice them in order to open up the road for the black queen to the king side. And I played, after knight a4, I played d4. Another possibility, a very interesting possibility, would have been c4, with the idea after b takes c4 to play knight b4 and then d takes c4, opening the road for the bishop and for the queen. But in the game I played d4, and you can see that my opponent spent some time trying to understand what is going to happen after e takes d4. And actually, even though after e takes d4, it seems that white can just take the pawn on d4, it's not that easy as it seems, because as we will see now, after e takes d4, c takes d4, if white will take with the knight, after knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, queen d5, I'm attacking the g2 square, and white has to protect the square by playing queen f3, because she cannot play f3 since I will take her bishop on d4 with check. And after queen takes f3, I will take on f3, I will win the pawn back. If white takes with the bishop, bishop takes d4, that first of all she gives away her strong bishop on b2, and after I take on d4, knight takes d4, I can just simply play rook a to d8, and then I will have enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn. So that's probably why my opponent played bishop b1, trying to keep up the pressure, but I played rook f to d8, protecting the pawn on d4, which is the isolated pawn, but actually it creates a very solid barrier for the bishop on b2. My opponent continued the game with rook e1, threatening to play on c6 and then on e7. That's why I moved my bishop away by playing bishop b4. I attacked the rook on e1, and actually the only move for white here is rook e2, so I didn't really understand why my opponent needed almost 1.5 minutes to play this move, because in the sudden death game we play with no increment. That means that white has 5 minutes to finish the game, while black has 6 minutes. And that means that even if you have an extra queen and you run out of time, there is nothing to save you. So time is as important in this kind of blitz as material. So finally, after some thought, my opponent moved her rook to e2. I immediately transferred my queen to h5. Queen d3. Now I could have played bishop d6, creating a very dangerous threat, knight b4, and then bishop takes f3, and then the square h2 will be under attack. But I decided to play on the queen side instead. I moved my pawn to a5, creating a threat bishop a6. My opponent used the fact that I moved the pawn to a5 and the square b6 is not protected, and moved her knight from a4, which is obviously not a great spot for the knight, to b6, attacking my rook on a8. Here I calculated very interesting lines which started with bishop d6, but decided not to opt for these risky lines and played rook a to b8 instead. And after h3, finally I moved my bishop from b4, but not to d6, since now I'm not really creating a threat on the h2 square, but to c5, attacking the knight on b6. Luckily for me, in this position, the queen on h5 is protected by my knight on f6, which is very important, since after my opponent's next move, queen b5, I can still move my bishop even though it's pinned. I took the knight on b6, bishop takes b6, queen takes b6, and here after knight b4 I'm not only threatening to just take on f3, but also the queen on b6 will be hanging after this move. And after rook e5 I played bishop takes f3 anyway, even though my queen on h5 is under attack. But if she takes the queen on h5 right now, I will take the queen on b6, and after she takes the bishop on f3, I will take on h5. Or if she moves the rook from h5 to somewhere else, to e5, I will move my bishop back and will win the whole night. That's why my opponent played queen c5. Queen takes a5 with the same idea would have been stronger, because it would help white to win the pawn as well as not to put her queen on the c file, which actually will decide the result of the game a few moves later. I played queen h6. Here my opponent took on f3. I took on h3, although queen to d2 would have been stronger. And here my opponent made the decisive blunder by playing bishop takes d4, since after rook b to c8, my queen on h3 is protecting the square c8 together with the rook on d8. If white retreats her queen from the c file, she will lose the rook. That's why my opponent resigned, and I won this match in a very exciting place, right in the heart of Machu Picchu.